Her house was the third mailbox on the right, and I'd already lifted my foot off the gas when she said it. "Don't drop me off yet." Quiet, almost under the rain. Then, quieter still, like she'd had to take a run at it, just keep driving. I didn't answer right away. The porch light at her mother's place was already coming up out of the dark. A smudged yellow ring swimming in the water on the windshield, and every wiper pass dragged it a little closer. 10 more seconds and I'd have turned in. I'd have said goodnight to my ex-girlfriend's little sister, watched her run through the storm to the door, and driven home to a life where this night was already over. Instead, I kept my foot off the brake, and the house slid past my window and fell away behind us into the rain, and neither of us said a word about the fact that I'd done it. I just drove, past the turn, past the last streetlight before the county road went dark, out to where there was nothing on either side but black fields and the white knives of rain coming sideways through the high beams. Her name was Nora, and I had spent 3 years being very careful not to think about her. By the time the sun came up, everything I'd believed about that carefulness, about why I'd kept my distance, about who'd been keeping their distance from whom had quietly come apart in the cab of my truck, and there was no putting it back. Let me go back to the start of the night, because the 4 words she said on that road don't mean anything until you understand how long both of us had been not saying them. The wedding was 2 towns over. The bride was a cousin of Rachel's, Rachel being the woman I'd been with the better part of 4 years, and not with for 3. It ended so quietly people who knew us still get the timeline wrong. No scene, no betrayal anybody could point to. We just thinned out until one Sunday we sat in the same kitchen and agreed it was over, and felt more relief than grief about it, which told you everything. She moved to Charlotte the next year, met a good man, sent me a Christmas card of the 2 of them squinting on a beach. And I looked at it and felt nothing sharp, just a far-off gladness, like hearing a town you used to live in finally fixed its bridge. So I had no real reason to be at that wedding, except the invitation came addressed to me by name in the bride's mother's handwriting, and except that some part of that family had never quite let go of me even after Rachel and I let go of each other. That part of the family was mostly one person, and her name was Nora. Nora Hale was Rachel's younger sister. I'd known her the whole time I was with Rachel, the way you know your partner's family at the edges, across crowded tables, in the kitchen drying dishes while the louder people held the room. She taught art at the elementary school in their town. She had this way of being in a room without spending it. Rachel walked into a place like a headline. Nora came in like a footnote somebody had taken care to write, and quietly hoped you'd read all the way down to. I want to be careful here, because of how it can sound. When I was with Rachel, building a whole imagined future around her, I did not let myself think about Nora. That's the truth, and I need it down. But I'd be lying if I said I never noticed her. There was a night years back of 4th of July on their parents' back porch. Everybody else down at the dock setting off the cheap fireworks when Nora and I ended up the only 2 who didn't care about the fireworks, sitting on the steps talking about nothing. A book she was reading. A deck I was building. She laughed at something I said in a way that landed somewhere it had no business landing, and I stood up and went and got a drink I didn't want, and filed the whole evening under a heading I never opened again. Because she was Rachel's sister and I was Rachel's, and that was the end of any sentence that started that way. After the breakup, I figured Nora went where the rest of them went, into a closed room of my life. Except she didn't quite text every year on my birthday, 3 years running. A comment now and then under a finished job I posted. Nothing anybody would notice. Nothing I let myself notice either. I told myself it was just Nora being kind to a man her family had no more use for. She found me near the coat rack around 10, where I'd drifted because the band was loud and I'd already done the part I came for. Shaken the groom's hand. Hugged the bride. Found Rachel's mother and let her hold my face in both hands and tell me I looked good, which I think we both knew was a kindness more than a fact. I was working out how soon I could leave without being rude when Nora came around the corner with a paper cup of coffee in each hand and stopped, like she hadn't expected to actually find me. "You came," she said, "for about 10 more minutes. That long." She handed me one of the coffees without asking if I wanted it. She'd remembered I don't drink at these things, which I hadn't told her in years. "I saw you do the receiving line. You've got a real talent for being the first one to leave a room. It's a gift. It's a coping strategy." I laughed before I could stop it, and she smiled like she'd been fishing for exactly that and landed it. She had on a dark green dress, and her hair was up and a little falling down, and there was paint under one of her nails she hadn't gotten out. And I noticed all of that in about a second and then made myself stop noticing it, the way I'd been making myself stop for years. We stood there at the edge of the noise and talked. Not about Rachel, who wasn't there. Charlotte's too far for a cousin's wedding, and nobody seemed to mind. We talked about her kids at school. The second grader who'd painted a self-portrait that was just a single enormous eye, and honestly it was the most honest thing anybody made all year. We talked about a built-in I'd done for a client out by the lake. She asked questions like she actually wanted the answers, which is rarer than people think, and I gave longer answers than I meant to, which is rarer for me than anybody would believe. I don't know how long we stood there. Long enough that the band took a break and came back. Long enough that I forgot about my 10 minutes. What broke it was the lights flickering and somebody by the window saying the rain had turned to ice on the cars, and the room doing that nervous half-laugh a room does when the weather decides to become the main event. Nora's face changed. "My ride," she said. "I came with the Doyles, and they live the opposite direction, and they're going to want to beat the ice. Where are you now? Still your mom's? For a while longer. Long story." She pulled out her phone, frowned at it. "It's the wrong way for everybody here. I'll figure it out. I should tell you that the smart thing, the careful thing, the thing the version of me who'd stood up off that porch years ago would have done, was to say I hope you get home okay and put on my coat and go. I'd built a whole quiet life out of doing the careful thing where Nora Hale was concerned. I'm going right past your mom's," I said. "It's no trouble." It was some trouble. Her mom's was a good 20 minutes out of my way, on roads that were already turning to glass. We both knew it. She looked at me for a second too long, and I watched her decide something behind her eyes, though I couldn't have told you what. "Okay," she said. "Thank you." The parking lot was a sheet of black ice with rain coming down on top of it, that miserable Pennsylvania mix that can't commit to being snow. I held her arm so she wouldn't go down in her heels, and she held mine, and we got to the truck doing that careful shuffle walk, and I felt the warmth of her hand through my coat sleeve and was glad it was too dark for her to see my face. I got the doors open, got the heat going, scraped a film of ice off the windshield with an old card from my wallet while she sat inside with her hands tucked under her arms watching me through the glass. Then we pulled out, and for the first 10 minutes we hardly said anything at all. The wipers worked and lost ground. The road unspooled black and shining in the headlights, and the white lines kept vanishing under standing water, then surfacing, then vanishing again. I drove slow, both hands on the wheel, the way you drive when the road's trying to kill you politely. Nora sat close to her door with her purse in her lap, and I could feel her there the way you feel heat off a stove without touching it. "You still build things you're proud of?" she asked finally, like she was reaching for something steady to hold. "Sometimes, most of it's kitchens for people who hate their kitchens." I let a beat go by. "I like the old houses, the ones that fight you. You pull up a rotten board and you can read the whole history of the place in what's underneath, where the water came in, what somebody fixed wrong 40 years ago and painted over so nobody'd see. That's the most you've ever said in a row." Storms got me talkative. "No," she said. "I think you're always like this. I think most people just don't wait long enough to find out." I didn't have anything to say to that, so I drove. But it sat in the cab with us, that sentence, warm and a little dangerous. And I knew she felt it sitting there too, because she went quiet in the particular way a person goes quiet when they've said more than they planned. We came up on the county road that led to her mother's. I knew the way. I'd driven it more times than I could count back when I belonged to that family. The fields opened up dark on both sides, and somewhere ahead her mailbox was waiting. The third on the right, and I felt the night starting to end the way you feel a song about to be over before the last chord. That's when she said it. "Don't drop me off yet. Just keep driving." And I did. I let the house go by. I felt her shoulders come down out of the corner of my eye, like she'd set down something heavy. For a full mile, neither of us spoke. Then I saw the dark shape of a closed farm supply store coming up, a single security light buzzing over an empty gravel lot, and I pulled in and put the truck in park, and the rain came down hard on the roof in the sudden stillness. "Nora," I said. "What's going on?" She was looking at her hands. "I'm okay. I promise I'm okay. I just couldn't walk into that house tonight." "Why not?" "Because if I go in, my mother's going to ask me how it was, and I'm going to say fine, and then I'm going to go up to the room I grew up in the house I moved back into at 31, because my lease fell through, and I told myself it was temporary, and I'm going to lie there and feel exactly as small as I felt all the way through high school." She let out a breath that shook on the edges. "And I am so tired of being small in that house. I came tonight knowing you'd probably be there, and I almost didn't, and then I did, and for 2 hours I didn't feel small at all. And I wasn't ready to walk into the door that makes me small again. That's the whole thing. That's the embarrassing whole thing." I sat with that. The wipers were off now, and the rain blurred the world outside into nothing. "You came knowing I'd be there," I said. She went still. I watched her realize what she'd let out. I didn't mean it like Nora. I turned in the seat to look at her. 3 years of birthday texts. A comment under every job I ever posted. I told myself that was you being nice to a guy your family dropped. My voice came out rougher than I wanted. Was it just you being nice? The rain filled up all the space where her answer should have been. "No," she said finally. "Barely there. It wasn't just nice. And here is the part I have to tell carefully, because it's the part I'd hidden from myself longest, the board I'd painted over so nobody would see the water underneath. I didn't sit there in that truck and discover something. I sat there and stopped pretending I hadn't known it for years. That night on the porch," I said. "The 4th of July, when everybody went down to the dock." Her head came up. "I got up and went and got a drink I didn't want," I said, "because if I'd stayed on those steps one more minute I was going to say something I had no right to say. You were Rachel's sister. I was Rachel's. There was no version of the world where that sentence had an ending I was allowed to reach. I looked out at the rain, so I never said it. I never even let myself finish thinking it. For 4 years, and then 3 more after, I kept it under a board and walked over the spot careful so it wouldn't creak. When I looked back at her, her eyes were wet and wide and fixed on me like she was afraid I'd take it all back. I thought it was only me," she said. Her voice broke clean in the middle. "Caleb, I thought it was only me. I thought I was the pathetic one, the little sister with a crush on her sister's boyfriend. The kind of thing you're supposed to grow out of. I told myself it was childish. I told myself for years. And then Rachel left, and you were free, and I still couldn't say anything. Because by then I'd convinced myself you'd never once looked at me like that. That I'd made the whole thing up out of a couple of conversations on a porch. You didn't make it up. You never said a word. Neither did you. We just looked at each other in the buzzing half-dark of that gravel lot. 2 people who'd each spent years certain they were carrying the whole weight of a thing alone, finding out at the exact same second that the other one had been bent under the identical weight in the next room over. I have built a lot of things with my hands. I have never felt anything come together as cleanly as the quiet in that truck, when we both stopped pretending. "I need coffee," Nora said suddenly, wiping her face with the back of her hand and half laughing at herself. "Real coffee. Not whatever that was at the reception. And the roads are getting worse, and if we keep sitting in this parking lot we're either going to freeze or do something we haven't earned yet, so is there anywhere open?" There was a diner out by the interstate that never closed, neon humming in the window, and I drove us there at 20 miles an hour with my hazards on, the ice popping under the tires. We got a booth by the window. The only other souls in the place were a trucker eating pie at the counter and a waitress with silver hair who brought us coffee without asking too many questions, which I respected immediately. We sat there until almost 2 in the morning, and we talked the way you can only talk when the thing you were both afraid of is finally out on the table between the sugar packets, no longer able to hurt you by being secret. She told me about moving back into her mother's house, how it had started temporary and turned into a slow erosion of every adult thing she'd built, until she was a 31-year-old woman being told to drive safe and text when she got there. She told me she'd applied for an art program 2 states away, a real one, a good one, and gotten in and turned it down, and never let herself fully ask why. I think I was waiting, she said, and didn't finish it, and didn't have to. I told her things I don't tell people. How after Rachel I'd decided, without ever saying it out loud, that I was the kind of man who was easy to leave easy, not because I was bad, but because I was quiet, because I fixed everybody's houses and let my own go cold in the walls, because being low maintenance is just a polite way of teaching people they can stop maintaining you. I figured I'd noticed you wrong, I said. That if a man like me thought a woman like you might have felt something, the safest bet was that I'd misread it. I've spent 3 years betting against myself. You bet wrong, she said. I'm getting that. She reached across the table then and put her hand over mine, the one with the paint still under the nail, and she didn't grab it or squeeze it dramatically. She just set it there, warm, like she was laying a board into place and checking that it sat flush. I turned my hand over under hers so our palms met. The waitress refilled our coffee and pretended not to notice, and I loved her for it. I don't want to do the thing, Nora said, looking at our hands, where we got rained on and confessed everything and now we're a couple by sunrise. I've watched my family rush every feeling they ever had into a shape they could announce at dinner. I don't want to be an announcement. I want to be she searched for it. I want to be slow. I want to be sure. I want to know that if you choose this, you're choosing me, the actual me, and not just the relief of finally saying the thing out loud. I can do slow, I said. I built my whole personality out of slow. That got a real laugh out of her. The free kind, the kind I'd heard exactly once before on a porch on the 4th of July and never since. It was almost 3 when the waitress told us the bridge on the low road had flooded and the county had it closed, and there wasn't a safe way to get Nora to her mother's till morning. We both knew what that meant, and we both got careful and quiet about it. In a good way. I have a guest room, I said. It's mostly spare lumber and boxes I haven't unpacked in 3 years. But it has a bed, and I have clean sheets, and I'm too tired to perform being a gentleman, so I'm just going to tell you it's yours, and that I'll be on the couch. And you can believe me or not. I believe you, she said. And the way she said it easy, certain did something to me I wasn't ready for. My house was 20 minutes the other direction, slow and white-knuckled the whole way. I cleared enough off the guest bed for her to sleep, found the sheets, handed her an old gray sweatshirt because her dress was damp at the hem and the house was cold. She stood in the doorway holding it, looking around at the boxes, at the life of a man who hadn't fully moved in anywhere since the day he moved out of his marriage. You really haven't unpacked, she said. Didn't see the point of getting comfortable somewhere I figured was temporary. She looked at me for a long moment. Caleb, it's been 3 years. Yeah, I said. I'm starting to notice a pattern. I slept badly on the couch, the way you do when there's someone in your house whose presence reorganizes the whole building. Around 4, I heard the floor creak, and she came down the hall in my sweatshirt, hair loose now, and sat in the armchair across from the couch with her knees tucked up. Couldn't sleep, she said. Me neither. We listened to the rain ease off into something gentler against the windows, and she said, out of the quiet, can I tell you something that's going to sound like too much? Tonight's been nothing but too much. Keep it up. The reason I never said anything, even after Rachel left, it wasn't only that I thought you'd never felt it. She pulled the sweatshirt sleeves down over her hands. It was that you and Rachel ending was the cleanest, kindest thing I ever watched 2 people do. Nobody screamed. Nobody cheated. You 2 just looked at each other one day and admitted the truth and let each other go with your whole hearts. Her voice got thick. And I thought if I ever get to be in something real, I want it to be built like that. Honest from the first day. And there was no honest way to walk up to my sister's ex and say I think it was always you. Not without it being a mess. Not without it costing somebody. So I waited. I waited for an honest door to open. She looked up. And then you drove past my mother's house tonight, and the door just opened. I got up off the couch and crossed the room and crouched down in front of her chair so we were level, the way you do when you need somebody to know you mean it. I'm not going to kiss you tonight, I said. Not because I don't want to. Because you said slow, and because you spent your whole life watching people rush, and I'm not going to be one more person who rushed you. I reached up and tucked the loose piece of hair back from her face, and that was all I let myself do, and it was almost more than I could stand. But I'm going to say the sentence I got up off that porch to keep from saying, because it's 7 years overdue. I think it was always going to be you. I just wasn't free. And then I wasn't brave, and now I've got no excuse left, and a storm parked us right where I couldn't dodge it anymore. She put her forehead against mine, and we stayed like that, breathing, and outside the rain finally let go of the night. We did it slow. After that, genuinely slow, the way we'd both said we wanted, the way neither of our families had ever managed. I drove her to her mother's the next morning on roads gone soft and gray, the ice all melted to puddles, and she got out at the third mailbox on the right in last night's green dress and my sweatshirt, and didn't try to hide either one. Her mother was on the porch. Nora hugged her, said it had been a long night and the roads were bad, and didn't explain past that, which I understood was a kind of beginning all its own, a grown woman declining to make herself small in the doorway that used to do it to her. We had coffee on Saturday mornings, public places at first, then walks along the river when it warmed up. Then a dinner that neither of us called a date until the waitress asked one check or two, and Nora looked at me like the question had legal weight. "One," I said, and watched her go pink to the ears. Rachel found out eventually, the way people do, and I sat with some dread about that call for a week before it came. But Rachel, to her enormous credit, just laughed, soft and a little amazed, and said, "Took you too long enough." And I realized she'd seen the thing on that porch years before I'd admitted it to myself, and had been kind enough and clean enough never to make it a weapon. We thinned out for a reason. She and I were always going to be better as the people who let each other go gently than as the people who stayed. Nora took the art program. Not 2 states away anymore, there was a satellite campus an hour from me, and she did it on weekends, and she'd come back Sunday nights smelling like turpentine and lit up in a way I hadn't seen in all the years I'd known her at the edges of rooms. She moved out of her mother's that spring, into an apartment over a flower shop with crooked floors and radiators that clanked like old arguments, and I carried boxes up the narrow stairs because she asked me to, and because I wanted to, and somewhere in the hauling I started, finally, to unpack my own house too. Funny how that works. You stop treating your life like it's temporary right around the time someone gives you a reason to stay in it. The first time I kissed her was June, and it wasn't in a storm, and it wasn't in the truck, and there was nothing dramatic about the sky. It was in the parking lot of a grocery store after we spent 10 minutes arguing about which peaches were ripe. She laughed at something I said, that free laugh, and I said her name, and she turned, and I asked if I could, and she said, "Because you want me? Or because the storm gave you permission?" And I said, "Because it's you." It was always going to be you, and then I did, slow and careful and a long time coming, with a cart corral and the automatic doors and a whole ordinary Tuesday going on around us, and it was better than any storm. Months later, on a clear September morning with no rain in the forecast and no reason to be anywhere, Nora climbed into my truck in jeans and a blue sweater, buckled her belt, and looked out the dry windshield at the road. "Where to?" I asked. "I don't know. That's not really how destinations work." "I know." She turned and looked at me, and there was the smile, the free one, the one I'd waited the better part of a decade to be allowed to keep. "Can we just drive somewhere because we want to this time? No storm, no house I'm running from, no saying goodnight and pretending." She reached over and put her hand on mine where it rested on the gear shift. Just us, and a road, and both of us choosing it with the lights on. That first night, I thought I was driving my ex's little sister home through a storm, doing one careful favor before I got back to the business of not thinking about her. Turns out, she wasn't asking me to keep driving so she could run from a house. She was asking because she knew, the way I was about to know, that the second the truck stopped, we'd have to go back to being nobody to each other, and neither of us could face that anymore. So I started the engine, and we drove north with the windows cracked, no storm chasing us. No door waiting to make either one of us small. Just road. Just morning. Just the two of us, finally out of excuses, choosing the long way on purpose.